Good evening, Pittsburgh Steelers fans. Welcome to another episode of Steelers Friday Night Six Pack. I'm your host, as always, Tony Defio, and I thank you for joining me on this Friday night. If you're joining me live, of course, on YouTube or Facebook. And before I continue, I always ask that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, where we bring you this show, Steelers Preview, the Steelers Hangover, Know Your Enemy. That's what it's changed to now with Michael Beck and Jeffrey Benedict, the Scobro Show, the Touchdown Under Show, so many, and we have more coming to you this fall. You can catch those shows live on YouTube and Facebook, and you can also catch them on any audio platform. And we also have audio only shows, including the Retro Show, Live Mike, Let's Ride, Stat Geek, the War Room. We have so many shows, and we have new. Jeffrey Benedict has a show coming out. I'm not sure what it's called yet, but we have all kinds of new stuff coming for you, new podcasting personalities. So please check all of that out. Please check out us live. Check us out on audio, and you won't be disappointed. We're just such a busy, hardworking podcasting platform, and we bring you everything: commentary, analysis. We always have guests on the what's it called? I just said it a minute ago. Know Your Enemy. Know Your Enemy. Every week they're going to have a football expert on, talking to you about either the Steelers or their upcoming matchup, upcoming opponent. So you're really going to love it. And of course, check us out on the web, Behind the Steel Curtain, the website, where we bring you news, commentary, film breakdown, everything. Anytime there's a transaction, a trade, they're always, Jeff and Dave and Michael and everybody, they're always updating that site. Anytime there's breaking news, anytime a player gets cut, traded, retires, they'll bring it to you. So please check that out. As we like to say, it's your one-stop shop for all your Steelers needs. So let's see who we have in the live chat before I continue. Just me, and somebody was asking about you on Monday, so it's nice to see you in the live chat. Just me, George Teston, Ollie Howard, Steelers Pittsburgh, Cree Ix. If I didn't say George Teston already, I apologize. George Teston, Kathy Forrid, Steel Nation 412, Full House almost, and Brian Brown? Why wouldn't there be a full house? We're here, folks. Training camp is finally here. Just think about how depressed you were on January the 10th. Remember that night? That night when Pittsburgh fell behind 28-0, and you kind of knew that their season was over. They made a comeback and gave you some hope, but you kind of knew that the year was coming to an end. Here we are, over 6 months later, and the Steelers are back at it at training camp. Not in Latrobe this time. They're at on the south side and at Heinz Field doing their thing. They reported on Wednesday, and the news is coming in fast and furious as it usually does once they report the training camp. So we're finally here. Danny Owens, Lamar Wilder, McEldew, Jasmine Sekahin. I hope I'm saying that right. But anyway, welcome to all you guys in the live chat. And I wanted to talk about the first day of training camp, and that was, of course, the arrival of Ben Roethlisberger, and more accurately, the photo that was taken of him as he arrived to training camp, and how it was circulated on social media, and how much he was criticized for that photo, for his physique, for how he looked. Remember what wasn't that long ago. There were people advocating on his behalf, saying, "Oh, Ben's super obsessed with conditioning and being in the best shape of his life, and he's obsessed with diet and blah blah blah." Well, people saw the picture of him just walking with a T-shirt on and whatever, and all the jokes began about how he wasn't in the best shape of his life, how he was nothing compared. He looked nothing like Tom Brady, and I got to be honest, I thought the overall reaction to that was just absolutely ridiculous and stupid, childish, dense, and just piling on. I mean, I know a lot of it was probably intentional because a lot of people just don't like Ben Roethlisberger. There's no question about that. But I thought a lot of it was just stupid and unnecessary piling on based on one photograph, and it's one of the dumbest things I've ever seen on social media, which is saying a lot when you factor in the history of social media. It takes in a lot of stuff when you say it's one of the dumbest things you've ever seen. Me personally, I thought it was just stupid. There's no other way to put it. What do people expect him to look like when he showed up to training camp? They just saw him a month earlier. They saw pictures anyway on social media of him at minicamp and before that OTAs. He looked pretty slim. What did they expect when he showed up? An 8-pack, a 6-pack? And I'm not talking about the kind you carry. I'm talking about his abs. Did they expect him to have this drastic change just because some guy spoke up on his behalf last week and said he's really committed to conditioning? No. What you wanted to see was he still thin, slim, leaner than he had been in the past? Yes, that's what you wanted to see, and that's what you saw. And the pictures coming out of training camp, they also depict him as being as slim and lean as you could possibly expect from Big Ben. The guy's never going to be this chiseled Greek god. He never was. He never will be. So I don't understand what all that's about. Again, other than people just being dense, stupid, and people just hating the guy, and for many reasons that I won't even go into. I think you know what those reasons are. That have to do with his past, and probably have to do with the fact that he's never really been the most accessible guy when it comes to the media, especially the national media. I mean, he might talk a good game the week of a game, but as far as like being this charismatic guy with the media, the national media, he's never been that guy. So I'm sure there's a lot of reasons for it, but there's no question that he's not a well-liked guy. And he's an easy target, especially when it comes to things regarding his weight, his fitness. And I'm not just being a homer when I say this. I'm happy with how he looks. He looks fine to me. I mean, maybe I'm not expecting enough. I don't know. But people compare him to Tom Brady, and they say he looks nothing like Tom Brady. Well, if you even look at pictures of Tom Brady at the beach or at a water park, he's not like he's got 4% body fat. I mean, he looks like a 40-something-year-old guy who's in shape. And that's kind of how Ben looks. Maybe not as in shape as Tom Brady, but in shape enough. And I think that's all you can ask for. So, again, I just think it was one of the dumbest reactions I've ever seen. And I know Ben is never one to come out and like say anything aggressively when it comes to the people that are against him or criticizing him. He's more passive aggressive. I've called him passive aggressive Ben plenty of times. And there's a lot of good and bad when it comes to passive aggressive Ben. But I think this will be a year where you see a lot of awesome passive aggressive Ben quotes, especially if they're doing well. If the Steelers are doing well, if he's doing well at the age of 39 and putting up good numbers, I think you're going to see a lot of sly remarks. And, Terry Bradshaw, he retired 38 years ago, 37 years ago. And he's never gotten over the criticism from, especially early in his career, dumb and this and that and the other. Wow. Ben would be a bigger man than me if he walks away from football whenever that eventually happens. And he's not kind of scarred by a lot of this stuff with the media and the fans and the people, his detractors. If he can just, brush this off, and move forward after football, good for him. Because I would, first of all, if I was Ben or the person running his account, which I guess if the person running his account would probably get fired if they did what I was proposing. But if I was Ben and if I was active on social media personally, I would troll the fans and the media constantly for the way, especially after the way they reacted to that picture on Wednesday. I mean, I would post pictures of me on Facebook and Twitter, Instagram, just eating eating cake and meat and everything else you could just to troll people, just to make them think that I'm just not caring about that's what I would do. That's just how I am. Ben's obviously classier than I am, so he hasn't been doing that, but I just think it's ridiculous. But I lost my train of thought there, but that's okay. I was on a rant. But those are my thoughts on Ben. I think, he looks as good as you could expect him to look at the age of 39. And being who he is, Big Ben, would they expect him to be 190 pounds, 200 pounds? No. If the guy's like 230, I think that's all you can. That's pretty good. He's what, 6'5". You can't be like thin, like super thin at that height, at that size, with that kind of frame. I'm sorry, you just can't. So I just think the critics are never going to back off. The only way they're ever going to back off from that guy is if he wins a championship. So it's kind of pointless for me to say it, but still, I like to get my my thoughts out there and how I think everybody acted pretty stupidly when it came to that picture on Wednesday. So now that rant is over, I will move on to my next topic. John C's checking in. Dark Storm 1 checking in. Philip Nicholas. Daredevil. All right. Irvin Brown. You guys are awesome. Thank you for joining me. And the next bit of news I wanted to talk about has to do with the sudden, speaking of Wednesday, was it Wednesday? Yeah. The sudden retirement of Vince Williams, the veteran inside linebacker, after 8 years. If you remember, and I'm sure you do, he was cut at the onset of free agency, and then eventually he was re-signed at a reduced cost. So people when he was re-signed, people just assumed that he would either be the starter alongside Devin Bush at inside linebacker, or he'd be a really, really good backup. He would provide quality veteran depth, and so I guess people were kind of relaxed about the depth at inside linebacker. Well, now you have to kind of worry about that again, I guess, with Vinny's retirement. Before I get into all that, I just want I don't want to get all mushy about Vince Williams, because I did that a couple months ago or a few months ago when he was cut. But I mean, you really have to give it to him for a heck of a career, for being a 6th round pick out of Florida State back in 2013. I was looking up some stuff today to prepare for tonight's show, and obviously the stats: he had 444 career tackles, 48 for loss, 20 and a half sacks, a couple interceptions. But I think the real impressive stat is that he played in 121 games, and only 10 players from that 2013 draft class played in more games than him, which I think says a lot. And every player that played more than him, those 10 players, they were all higher draft picks. So you have to hand it to Vince for beating the odds, because he really did. Not only making the team as a 6th round pick, but having a career that lasted almost a decade. There are very few players of that draft pedigree that can say that. So, I was sad to see him go. I was up, reading some stuff. I think on Behind the Steel Curtain on Friday, where they quoted Keith Butler, the defensive coordinator, and he was of the opinion that he didn't think Vince felt that he was ready to play. And why, I don't know. Maybe it's just age. Maybe he just doesn't want to, when you think about the price that these guys have to pay, not just to be good, but just to be able to play, just to be healthy enough and conditioned enough to play football on a weekly basis. Maybe at the age of 31, after 8 years, making the kind of money he made, being a 6th round pick, maybe he just doesn't want to pay that price anymore. We kind of saw the same thing with Vance McDonald right after the season. That's a lot to ask. People have to remember, these guys aren't in the gym for 45 minutes, and they can't just do that and be ready to play. They probably have to put in hours every day at the gym, whether it's weight training and lifting. I'm sorry, lifting. That is weight training. Weight training, conditioning, cardio. They probably have to put in hours a day. And I know you might be saying, well, they get paid millions. And that's true. They do get paid a lot of money, but they're still human beings. And they have to that's a mighty toll taken on your body to even work out like that, let alone play football, be involved in 30, 40 mini car wrecks every Sunday. So, I'll always be grateful to Vince. I was talking to Shannon on Monday on The Hangover, and I mentioned how I was sorry that Ramon Foster never got to play in the Super Bowl, but he actually did. At least he was on the Super Bowl 45 team. I don't know if he was a starter then, but he was on the team. But at least he got to appear in one, whereas Vince never even got to appear in the Super Bowl. So that's a shame that he had to walk away before that happened. But what are you going to do? He's very few players get to play in a Super Bowl, let alone win one. So that's not uncommon. But he had a nice little career for himself. And when it comes to that, when it comes to Vince's retirement, his surprise retirement, I think it's a cautionary tale in how precarious depth really is. People go on and on about depth, and they're concerned about it, and they want the Steelers to address it with these almost proven commodities at just about every position. But even when you do that with a guy like Vince, he's a proven commodity, at least as far as being a decent player, somebody who, if he didn't win the starting job, you'd feel comfortable with him if he had to fill in for Bush or whomever is starting alongside him. But even when you have guys like that, there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee that they're gonna be any good. After a certain point of their career, and you just never know when depth is gonna suffer for one reason or another, whether it's a retirement or it's just the fact that you didn't have you didn't have the resources to go out and get somebody decent to be a backup for you. And most teams don't have that kind of luxury, especially in the salary cap era. So, what does it say about their depth now at inside linebacker? I don't know. I mean, obviously, I think Spillane is a major candidate to be a starter now alongside Bush. After him, is it going to be Marcus Allen that's your primary backup? Is it going to be Buddy Johnson, the 4th round pick? People were excited about him. I wrote about him back in the spring, and I said, based on his draft profile, he seemed like a younger version of Vince Williams, but he's still an unproven player. He's still a 4th round pick who hasn't played in the NFL yet. So you just never know what's going to cut, what he's going to be able to do, if he's going to make the team or not, or who knows. So yeah, what's gonna happen with inside linebacker? You just don't know now as far as depth. Are they going to be set there? Even if you think they are set on paper, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be. So I think that's kind of, no matter what position that you're concerned about, even if they brought somebody in, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be okay if there's an injury. You remember what happened back in 2014? They brought in LeGarrette Blount, really good player, really good running back, but he was kind of a jerk, kind of a selfish player. He didn't take too kindly to having his playing time reduced behind Le'Veon Bell, who was an All-Pro in 2014. That was his coming out party that year. And he walked off the field early in that game against Tennessee on Monday Night Football, and he was subsequently cut. So, you just never know. Even if you think you're set at a certain position, you just never know what can happen. So I think it's a cautionary tale that depth is a problem for everyone. Even teams that think they're set at a position, when it comes to the depth, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are. So that's all I want to cover on that topic. And on that note, I think I will close out the first half of the show. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube live, please stay with me. I'm not going anywhere. If you're listening on an audio platform, I certainly thank you for downloading part 1. And please return for part 2 of this episode of Steelers Friday Night Six Pack. And welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to part 2 of this episode of Steelers Friday Night Six Pack. If you're watching me live on YouTube or Facebook, I thank you for sticking around. If you're watching on an audio, or if you're listening on I can't talk. Slow down. If you're listening on an audio platform, I thank you for downloading part 2 of this episode of Steelers Friday Night Six Pack. So let's see what we have here in the live chat before I continue. And what is George Testons asking? Would like to see that blanket, Steeler chick. Maybe Tony can flash your profile. I don't know if I can do that. I don't know what blanket you're referring to, George, but I'm sure it's an awesome one. So, all right. I'm going to go off the rails too quick. I don't want to lose my spot here. All right, here we are. Steelers Pittsburgh says about LeGarrette Blount walking off the field is so classless. Well, yeah. I mean, especially you might think it's a minor thing to do that with 10 seconds left and you already had the game won or whatever. But it's just it's such a taboo thing to do in the NFL. Even if you don't think it causes any harm, the way players look at that, the way coaches look at that is so, they think of it as such a disrespectful thing to do as a teammate that you almost have to part ways with that guy for doing that. So, yeah. All right. And this leads into my next topic. And this is from Yul Skinner. And he asks, is Alex Highsmith still the guy? I'm beginning to wonder. And I'm beginning to wonder why you're wondering that, because there's no indication that he wouldn't be the guy. First of all, nobody knows if he's the guy. All we know is he had a decent showing last year after being a third-round pick out of Charlotte. He was backing up both Bud and TJ Watt, of course, and he had a decent enough showing. He made some plays, especially at the end of the year. But I don't know why you'd be wondering about Alex Highsmith based on what? Based on what? I mean, the fact that they signed Melvin Ingram, they signed him to be the backup, to be the veteran backup at outside linebacker. People were clamoring for that, right? They were clamoring for them to bring in a guy, a quality veteran player, to provide depth at outside linebacker. And they did that. Melvin Ingram, Justin Houston, they were the guys that people were talking about. They brought in Melvin Ingram, signed him to a 1-year deal for $4 million. Suddenly people were talking about Alex Highsmith as if he's in trouble, as if he's, they don't have any confidence in him. And I just don't know why. I don't know why. Everybody knew that they had to address outside line, the depth at that position, and they did. So now people are starting to speculate, why is Ingram here? Is he going to be the starter alongside Watt? If he was really capable of coming in and being Bud Dupree's replacement, would he have lasted until July? I don't think so. He lasted until July because, number one, he's 32 years old. Number two, he dealt with so many injuries over the past few years, serious injuries. And maybe number three, he was asking for too much money for what he's capable of doing at this point of his career. Players that are capable of filling in and replacing Bud Dupree, a player of that caliber, they don't last until July. They get snatched up pretty quickly. Now, a lot of people were saying, well, maybe he was just biding his time. People like Ingram and Houston, a lot of those players on that free agent list, people were trying to tell me that they were just biding their time, waiting for the right offer to come along. Yeah, they were doing that because their market in March was dried up. It was non-existent. So they had to wait. If there was a prime market for those guys, they would have got signed right away. And there wouldn't be any question as to whether or not they were brought in to be the starter or the backup. It would be no doubt that it would be penciled in as the starter right from the very get-go. So I have all the confidence, well, as much confidence as I can have in a second-year player in Alex Highsmith. So I think people were, jumping to conclusions and kind of overreacting when Ingram was brought in. And I know a lot of the reasons why, and that's because there's so much coverage on the NFL nowadays. Everything is like blown out of proportion, no matter what it is. It used to be back in the day, guys would be brought in July, just signed off the street, and they'd come in and do a good job and, be a fill-in over the course of a year. And people would go, oh, great. That was good. I'm glad that they signed that player. Think of Noel Daymore. I don't remember when they signed him, if it was early in free agency or late, but either way, nobody was going nuts about Noel Daymore when he was brought in here. Kimo von Oelhofen's another one. And yet, they were really valuable veterans. Now, everybody that's a free agent, no matter how long they're sitting out there, people act like, well, if you don't get this guy in here, then your team has no chance of winning. If the Steelers don't bring this player in, then they're not committed. They need this guy to put them over the top. And like I wrote about the other day, if you need a player in July to put you over the top, you're probably going to be stuck at the bottom for most of the year. It's just how it is. So, and what else? What are people saying about Highsmith? Creex says Highsmith is the future. I do believe he starts, but it will take him another year, maybe two, to really go off. But he will still get 6 to 8 sacks. You know what? I think they would take that. Think about it. If you got TJ Watt, approaching 13 to 14 sacks, presuming he has the same kind of year that he's had since 2017, and if Highsmith gets you 7, 8, 9, maybe Ingram in a reserve role throws in another 4 or 5, you would take that from the outside linebacker position, wouldn't you? I mean, you would take those kind of sacks, sack totals. I would, and especially when you consider how dominant that defensive line is when it comes to getting after the quarterback. When we're talking about Cam Hayward and Stephon Tuitt and even Alou and whoever else, I think you would take that kind of that combination of sacks from those 3 players, 24, 25 total. What's wrong with that? Russ Obestein, this might be a good point. He says, I think Williams got angry when Ingram was signed for $4 million and he was only getting $1 million, and I don't blame him. Well, if that's the case, then I guess you could say that, but I'm not. We might never know. That stuff might not come out until some future interview years down the road. Maybe he's on somebody's podcast in a couple of years. Maybe he's on Willie Cologne's podcast on Barstool in a few years, and he says, "Oh yeah, when they signed Ingram, and you brought me back, and I had to take a $3 million pay cut. Maybe it'll come out then." Or like Keith Butler said, maybe he just doesn't feel like he can do it anymore at the age of 31. So, and George Sessions says they play different positions, but that doesn't really mean anything. I mean, you've been here for 8 years as a loyal player, and they cut you and they bring you back at a reduced cost, and you bring in Ingram, this veteran who's older than you, who's been sitting out there for months, and you bring him in for $4 million. But again, that's just speculation. Nobody knows. So, on that note, I think I will open things up to some questions and comments to close out the show, because I ran through the 3 subjects I wanted to run through. There's one more thing I want to talk about, and that's the before I take some questions, and that's the announcement. I think it was on Wednesday that or maybe it was Thursday that the teams that have widespread COVID outbreaks, teams that aren't, that have low vaccination rates, they could be subject to forfeits. And I think people jump to conclusions there, thinking that it would be different than last year. But if you really look at the wording of it, and I think Dave Schofield did a good job of pointing this out the other day, the way they worded it, it said that they're going to do everything they can basically to get every game in through 18 weeks. But after 18 weeks, if there are games that can't be made up, then the team that's responsible, so to speak, for the outbreak, for the COVID outbreak, will have to forfeit. So I think it's going to be a lot like last year when it comes to how they handle COVID situations in 2021. If there's a bye that they can utilize, they're going to utilize it. If that means giving a team a bye way earlier than it should have had one, that's what they're going to do. They're going to, if it means pushing games to a Wednesday, they're going to do that. If it means pushing games to a Thursday, they're going to do that. They're going to do everything they can to get all these games in. Because if you read that whole thing, and I read it over and over again, trying to understand it, because sometimes it takes me a while to understand these kind of things. If there's a game that's forfeited, both teams, meaning even the team that's innocent of the outbreak, that did everything right, neither team will get paid. Now, can you imagine the uproar over that if both teams had to forfeit their game checks because one team had an outbreak? So believe me, the NFL doesn't want that kind of mess, and they're going to do whatever. And they don't want to lose that kind of revenue either. They don't want to lose gate receipts, because you figure unless there's some kind of lockdown again, they're going to be playing games in front of full stadiums this year, unlike last year. So they're not going to want to lose all that revenue. So, yeah, it might have seemed like, oh my gosh, huge ramifications if a team has an outbreak, but it's really not going to be that. At least not until all other measures are exhausted. Then maybe you're looking at a forfeit, but they're going to do everything they can to get these games in. So that's the last thing I wanted to talk about. And now I will open things up to some questions. Paul Schlurf, whose name I probably butchered, he joins us from YouTube, and he says, you hear that 2 coaches who have refused to get a vaccine have been let go. O-line coach for Vikings for one. I didn't hear that. That's kind of surprising. Now, is that the reason, or is it some other reason? Is it performance-based? I don't know, but that's the first I'm hearing of it. Just Me says about the vaccine. People are chiming in with that. We have a WSU coach that came out and said he wasn't getting it. School was out on damage control. Yeah, it's gonna be probably one of the most controversial things that we hear about week in and week out this year. Whether it be the NFL or at the college ranks, it's players that aren't and coaches that don't want to get the vaccine for one reason or another. You can, whether it's political or just because they're afraid of the health ramifications. It's going to be a big thing. It's already been a big thing this offseason. Guys like Cole Beasley and DeAndre Hopkins have been pretty vocal about it. So it's going to be an interesting thing to see. If we thought it was going to be different than it was last year as far as COVID throwing a wrench into the works, maybe not. I was hoping it would be a lot different, but this is like an unprecedented thing, like I said many times last year. So hopefully it is mostly a thing that's in the background, but all I can do with that is cross my fingers. So let's see what we have here. See if we can get some real football stuff. Here's one from Brian Brown. This is a pretty, it's not a comment. It's not a question, but it's a comment. He says, the Steelers are going to kick the doggy doo out of everybody. Wow. Now that's, if more national reporters had, and analysts said that kind of stuff, I think Steeler fans would feel more respected. But unfortunately, it's been kind of the opposite predictions this offseason. All right. Russ Obenstein says secondary battle is going to be great. Yeah, we were talking about that on Monday, Shannon and I. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens, because obviously you have Joe Hayden, who's who's your starter, and of course you have Edmonds and Fitzpatrick as your safeties. Who's going to get that number 2 cornerback spot? Is it going to be James Pierre? Is it going to be Justin Lane? Is it going to be one of these undrafted free agent rookies? Wouldn't that be something? Is it going to have to be Cam Sutton, who moves over and plays on the outside, and they have to move somebody into the slot? People were already talking up Antoine Brooks. Evidently, he made a pretty spectacular interception in early days of training camp. So if there's somebody that, your 6th-round pick last year, kind of a forgotten guy, wouldn't that be something if he rose up and made a huge leap and played a valuable role for them in 2021? That would be spectacular. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that, those underdog stories that are really fun to witness as a fan. We saw it with Mike Hilton back in 2017. He kind of came out of nowhere. People were reeling from the Cesquez Golson, the 2nd-round pick in 2015, who just suffered injury after injury. I don't even think he made it into a preseason game, if I'm not mistaken. He certainly didn't make it into a regular season game, and he never made the final roster. And they were reeling from that, and they found somebody else from Ole Miss, an undrafted free agent, and he became one of the best slot corners in the game. So you just never know. Reginald Rivers asked, and by the way, welcome Reggie, and I saw Clarence Washington and Michael O'Malley's here, so welcome everybody. Do you think all Steelers draft picks will make the roster? Do I think they will? No. I mean, I think the odds are pretty long in most years that every draft pick will make it. It'd be nice, and when I say that, I mean. If they were all that good that they made the final roster, I think that would bode well for the job that the scouts did, and Kevin Colbert and Tomlin, and analyzing these players this past offseason, evaluating them. But do I think they'll all make it? I mean, if I was a betting man, I'd say no, just based on history. That's a lot of guys. That's a lot of rookies to have to, to really. Catch on quickly and make an NFL roster in their first year. All right, let's go on down the line here. All right. Mule Skinner says of Brooks. Oops, I skipped it. He says Mule. Well, boy, I'm having a lot of bloopers tonight here. But at least I'm on the air. Last week at this time, I was still trying to get on the air. Anyway, Mule says that Brooks isn't fast enough to play slot. So I guess we'll have to find out. Yeah, I mean, you never know. I mean, he barely got to play last year, and he certainly didn't get to play in the preseason because they didn't have a preseason last year. So let's see what happens once these guys play some in-stadium football, meaning the preseason, because that's when all the youngsters are going to get long looks or longer looks. All right. Evidently, we're having a war in the live chat about the vaccine, which is why I was kind of afraid to bring it up. But whatever, it is what it is. You can't hide from it. It's a real thing, and it's going to affect the NFL one way or another this year. So you kind of have to talk about it. But nobody's ever going to see eye to eye on this. You would think people would. Honestly, I'm not going to lie. I was hoping everybody would just get the vaccine and we would just move forward. But that's just my own opinion. But I won't address it any further because I know you can't address stuff like that. People just go nuts with it, but whatever. And Allie Howard says something that you hardly ever see on social media. Steelers are contenders as long as Mike Tomlin is here. There you go. I agree. So far, it's been proven to be correct. They've only played one game where they were officially eliminated from the playoffs with him as head coach. So here's one from the always outspoken Mule, and he says Bugs will probably be cut so that Loudermilk can be given a gift position. I don't know why you say that. Yeah, they traded up to get him in the 5th round, but you're not gonna, hurt your team by keeping a guy like that doesn't deserve to be here. That just to save face. I mean, it's a 5th round pick. It's not like they traded up in the 1st round and reached for him or anything like that. So, all right, and let's see what else we have here. And Mule says Loudermilk is soft. Boy, Mule he's bringing the opinions tonight. Brooks is slow. Loudermilk is soft. I don't know how anybody named Loudermilk can be soft. I mean, I'm just saying that seems like a pretty tough name. To have a name like that, you'd have to be ready to handle yourself at any given moment. All right. And George Teston asks, if Tomlin goes, who can replace him? Who knows? I'm sure you can list 50 candidates, but that's for a podcast way down the road, I think, because I think Tomlin's going to be here for another 5-10 years. Steeler Chick 46 asks, this is one I can't really answer. How many interceptions will Minka get this season? I hope he gets 5 or 6, because I think if he gets 5 or 6, then he's your typical big play making Minka Fitzpatrick. He's probably in the running for Defensive Player of the Year. He's probably scoring 1 or 2 touchdowns off of those 5 or 6 picks. So I hope it's 5 or 6. Well, there you go. Kathy Ford asked, how many returns for 6? I'll say 2. There you go. All right. On that note, I think I will, at the 42-minute mark, I think I will bid you adieu. I'm kind of out of steam. But look at it this way, Steeler fans. Training camp is here. And today is the 23rd of July as I'm doing this show. And maybe when you're listening to it, it's like the 25th or the 26th of July. That means there's less than 2 weeks before there's an actual game to talk about. I'll be so excited. 2 weeks from tonight, I'll be talking about the Hall of Fame game, the aftermath, and who looked great and who didn't. And did Ben play? Didn't he play? Should he have played? Why didn't Najee Harris play? Because I predict he won't play. I predict he's already going to be the starter. It's going to be like a Le'Veon Bell thing. Every little bump and bruise that he gets, they're going to hold him out because I think they know he's their guy. So I can't wait for that. But in the meantime, we have plenty more podcasts you can listen to and watch and download. And of course, we have countless articles coming your way about training camp and players and transactions and trades. Maybe, who knows? Probably not trades, but certainly there could be another signing in the mix. You just never know. So please check out Behind the Store Curtain, the website. Again, I'm asking you, please, and subscribe to YouTube, our YouTube channel, and watch us on Facebook. We're very active on Facebook and Twitter. You can find us everywhere. But until I talk to you again on Monday with Brian and Shannon on The Hangover, you guys have a great weekend. And as always, go Steelers.